prophets of Israel, or that you're one of those other prophets from history sort of brought back to life. And Jesus said, but you guys, who do you say that I am? And Peter, being the big mouth in the group of 12, says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Just comes right out of him just like that. And Jesus says, heaven and earth, well, have not revealed this to you, Peter, but God. So, there is something amazing right there. There is this moment of awareness that Peter has, even in his impetuousness. You, Jesus, are the Messiah, the Son of God. Now, a lot happened between that story and what we hear today, but still, that's Peter's declaration. That's the trajectory of meeting Jesus and seeing him in action as a healer and as a teacher. Who is this guy? Well, there is a change in the tone of the story just about when we hear today's transfiguration vision. And it is this. I think I've mentioned it to you all many times. It is the shift that happens in the gospel storyline from this sort of positive, promising ministry of Jesus to when Jesus says, I am going to set my face toward Jerusalem. I am going to go there, and I know that I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to die. I'm going to be killed, in fact. So when Jesus says that, he now has set his heart and soul upon really the very purpose that he feels he's called to be in God's sight. And, of course, his friends have no idea what's coming. And because they have no idea what's coming, and Jesus knows that he's really going to take them over this spiritual cliff into the darkness, into the unknown, into really terror and violence and the wickedness of human corruption. He's going to push them all off the cliff with him in this storyline. And this story of the Transfiguration, by many, is understood as this last little hint of divine glory that is a point of courage for the disciples. You can see that, and I hope you can kind of see that in the storyline as I've explained it, that just before Jesus really intentionally goes towards his suffering, toward his death, he gives 3 of his closest followers this vision. That there is God's life operating in his very body and being. He is God among us. Now, that kind of courage, it's a wonderful thing to have. That kind of a vision. Yes, oh yes, really, when he's transfigured, he's glowing. And I can imagine that sometimes when you are truly terrified, even those former visions of glory just don't help. But it happened. Well, there is another concern, though, that the church would have felt as it went throughout its time after the resurrection of Jesus. They would have wondered, is what we are doing, following this one who we witness as crucified and risen, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing something that is so completely outside the Jewish heritage, the Jewish faith? What is it that we are doing? The Jewish followers of Jesus would say. Because that is precisely the problem. You see, Jesus, if he's going to take you off a cliff spiritually, is one thing. But for those who around him who grew up as faithful Jews, they would have had to wonder, is there a connection between this truly bizarre experience and everything that has been the history of the people of Israel? And so the vision is not just Jesus in glory, but Jesus in conversation with Moses and Elijah. So you can understand that here, the sign, the depth of the meaning behind this experience is that Jesus is having a conversation with people of history, and yet they are alive in God's sight. Jesus is having that kind of a connection to the ancient past, the one great story of God. And so in a sense, The church, hearing Matthew's gospel, or Mark's gospel, or Luke's gospel, the early church would have said, yes, there is a connection here. This is not just some bizarre hallucination on our part, following this one who said he was God's son, this one whom we proclaim as Messiah. We're not making this up, the church said. There is a background, there's a history here, there's a connection to the ancient past. God keeping true to his promises. I can imagine another way that this story could be powerful to not only the first century church, but to the church today. And it's this: that Jesus reveals that he is having a life-giving conversation, in this case with Moses and Elijah, but truly with all those people touched by God throughout the ages. He's having a life-giving conversation. And Peter, the apostle, does not know how to enter into the conversation. I believe it's either in Mark or Luke's gospel, when Peter makes that remark about, Lord, it would be really nice if I could build 3 little booths, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah. And I think it's Mark's gospel that says, and he said this not knowing what he was talking about. That Peter, in his impetuousness and in his sort of spiritual cluelessness, even though he himself proclaimed Jesus as Messiah, that he says something that he has no idea what he's talking about. Let's memorialize this moment, Peter says. Let's just make a little memorial booth for you, and one for Moses and one for Elijah. He just cannot do that with the life of God. Peter doesn't even know how to enter into the conversation. He doesn't know really what to say. And I can imagine also that this would run true for the various clustered communities of the church through the first century. When those communities felt weak or not sure of their purpose or their mission, when those churches would have felt that so much was against them, both in their lives in the Roman Empire, their lives with their neighbors, whether they were Jew or Gentile, they really did not know how to enter into the broader conversation of what God was doing into their lives. They sensed that perhaps in their own lives as the church, maybe Jesus was again taking them over a great existential cliff, and they had no idea what was coming next. Well, I think this still applies to us today. Something about the life of the church always involves this edging toward a cliff, toward the unknown, toward something that truly is frightening sometimes. We don't know what to do about issues of poverty in this world. We can think of things. We can try and act on them. But perhaps the great suffering of this world is still something we do not really want to enter into as a global conversation or a local conversation. We do not know how to enter into that conversation with Jesus and Moses and Elijah and all the great saints and prophets. We aren't sure. We don't know what will be asked of us. We don't know how we'll respond. Maybe we don't even know what questions to ask. We don't know how to answer the questions that Jesus might ask of us. What are you going to do with your life now that we've talked? Who do you say that I am? I'm thinking about yesterday's experience with our cultural competency workshop that we had here with our sister congregation of Nuestra Senora. And it revealed to me again that we really don't know how to enter into a conversation. It was a struggle to experience in many ways. There was a desire to be hopeful on a number of levels. And yet a significant feeling of distrust and discomfort still exists between folks who have been here either for 3 decades or less than 3 years. And this troubles me, and at the same time, I don't think that Jesus would want us to be in any other place. That is, as we embark upon Lent, when we have been fed by his word and experienced him as a healer and a teacher, we now must, in a way, go with him toward the cross. I don't think there's really any other option as a disciple of Jesus. When we have conversations, however clumsy they may be, we are not sure how we're going to proceed. We have these conversations with each other, and we cannot imagine that God is with us because we have to somehow figure it all out on our own. Something has got to die in this conversation. It's a conversation that I think most of us probably don't typically have in our broader culture about issues of race or privilege, about issues of how we understand each other, and do we understand each other, and is there any point in understanding each other? In the midst of all of that, it feels like we are on the edge of a cliff, and we are wondering, does God know what he's doing in this conversation? But something must go forward with God. Something must die within, I think, everyone's heart. And I don't know any other place where one could have such a significant conversation and totally depend upon God for the help we need. I would hope that in this time of Lent, we spend time listening to each other across our two congregational experiences. And I would hope that in that listening we learn a little more deeply about what it means to listen to God. Jesus, who is his Son, who appears in glory before the darkness sets in and before the uncertainty envelops his friends as they journey toward Jerusalem. My hope is that in our listening, we enter into not only a time of vulnerability, but also a deep awareness about how imperfect any human attempt at God's justice is. I hope that in our listening, we ask God humbly again to invite us into a great and life-giving conversation. That's my hope for all of us as we embark upon Lent, this Ash Wednesday, the Sundays to come.